The Young and the Restless Spoilers Sharon's Escape, a tale of resilience. The damp, cold air of the underground chamber clung to Sharon's skin as she gripped the iron rod tighter. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer physical strain of her relentless efforts. Every swing she made against the rusted chains echoed in the silent, oppressive room, a cacophony of desperation and determination. "Cameron," she screamed, her voice bouncing off the unforgiving stone walls. Her cries carried a mixture of frustration and confusion. Where was he? He had promised to help her. He was supposed to be her ally, her savior. But now, in her moment of greatest need, he was nowhere to be found. With a final, defiant swing, the iron rod connected with the chain. A sharp clang reverberated, and the metal links shattered, falling to the ground in a noisy heap. Sharon let out a ragged breath, her victory bittersweet. She was free of the chains, but the massive iron door remained an unyielding barrier between her and freedom. She glanced at the door, her mind racing. Breaking the chains had been difficult, but breaking through the door seemed nearly impossible. Still, Sharon was not one to give up. She inspected the door, looking for weak points, and began to hammer away at the hinges with the same iron rod. Sweat dripped from her brow, mixing with the grime on her face. Every muscle in her body ached, but she pressed on. Meanwhile, Jordan, the woman who had imprisoned Sharon, returned to the chamber. As she descended the creaking wooden stairs, she noticed something was amiss. The chains that once bound Sharon were broken, yet the heavy door remained shut. Panic surged through her veins. Where could Sharon have gone? She scanned the dimly lit room, her unease growing with every passing second. "Sharon?" Jordan called, her voice laced with a mixture of authority and trepidation. No answer came. The air in the chamber was thick with tension, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Unbeknownst to Jordan, Sharon was lurking in the shadows, her figure obscured by the darkness. She gripped the iron rod tightly, her body coiled like a spring. As Jordan took another cautious step into the room, Sharon seized her opportunity. With a swift, calculated movement, she struck Jordan on the back of the head. A sickening thud echoed as Jordan crumpled to the ground, her body limp. Blood began to pool around her head, staining the cold, hard floor. Sharon stared at the scene, her chest heaving. She hadn't intended to kill, only to incapacitate. But now, as she looked at Jordan's still form, doubt began to creep into her mind. Was she dead? Sharon didn't have time to find out. Sharon knelt beside Jordan and rummaged through her belongings, her hands shaking as she found the keyring. She quickly identified the large, rusted key that matched the lock on the iron door. Her fingers fumbled as she inserted the key and turned it. With a loud creak, the door swung open, revealing the dense, freezing forest beyond. The cold night air hit Sharon like a wave as she stepped out of the chamber. Her breath formed white clouds in the frigid air. She looked back at the chamber one last time before sprinting into the woods, her feet crunching against the snow-covered ground. Every step felt like a small victory, but her ordeal was far from over. The forest was a labyrinth of towering trees and tangled underbrush. Sharon's thin clothing did little to shield her from the biting wind. She stumbled over roots and slipped on patches of ice, her exhaustion mounting with each passing moment. The moonlight barely pierced through the thick canopy above, leaving her disoriented and vulnerable. She paused to catch her breath, leaning against a tree. Her mind raced with questions. Where was Cameron? Why hadn't he come for her? But as the cold began to seep deeper into her bones, she pushed the thoughts aside. She couldn't rely on anyone but herself. Cameron's absence, though painful, had taught her that lesson all too well. Hours passed as Sharon navigated the treacherous terrain. Her hope began to dwindle, and her limbs grew heavier with fatigue. Just as despair threatened to consume her, she stumbled upon a narrow path, barely visible beneath the snow. Following the trail, she eventually emerged into a clearing where she saw a faint glimmer of light in the distance. Her heart leapt. Was it a house? A cabin? Whatever it was her best chance for survival. As Sharon approached the light, tears welled up in her eyes. She had made it. No one had come to save her, but she didn't need them to. Every ounce of strength, every decision, every moment of sheer willpower had led her to this point. She wasn't a victim. She was a survivor. Sharon reached the door of the small cabin and knocked, her hands trembling not with fear but with the exhilaration of triumph. As she waited for a response, she allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. She didn't need Cameron. She had saved herself. A lesson in resilience. Sharon's escape wasn't just a physical journey, it was a testament to her resilience and determination. In the face of betrayal and unimaginable odds, she proved that she was her own greatest ally. Though her ordeal was far from over, she had already won the most important battle, reclaiming her agency and strength. A chase in the night, Sharon's fight for freedom. Sharon stumbled through the forest, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The icy rain soaked her clothes, chilling her to the bone. The branches clawed at her skin as if the forest itself were trying to hold her back. She glanced over her shoulder, her heart pounding like a drumbeat in her chest. The faint sound of an engine roaring to life cut through the howling wind. Jordan was awake. The blow Sharon had delivered wasn't enough to keep Jordan down for long. A feral determination burned in Jordan's eyes as she clutched her bleeding head, climbed into her truck, and sped off into the night. The vehicle's headlights sliced through the darkness, bouncing wildly over the uneven terrain as Jordan searched for her escaped captive. Sharon had gained a head start, but she knew it wouldn't last long. Jordan was ruthless, cunning, and now fueled by anger. The hunter and the prey. Sharon pushed herself further into the forest, her legs screaming in protest with every step. She was exhausted, her energy drained by the cold and the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The rain fell harder now, turning the ground into a muddy trap that clung to her shoes, slowing her down. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Up ahead, she spotted a dense thicket of bushes. Without hesitation, she dove into the undergrowth, ignoring the sharp branches that scratched her arms and legs. She curled herself into a ball, pulling the wet fabric of her coat tighter around her body, and tried to quiet her ragged breathing. The rumble of the truck's engine grew louder, the headlights illuminating the forest in erratic flashes. Sharon could see Jordan's shadowy figure in the driver's seat, scanning the woods with predatory focus. "Sharon." Jordan's voice pierced the night, filled with venom and frustration. "You think you can run from me? You won't get far." Sharon's heart raced as the truck rolled closer, the beam of the headlights dangerously near her hiding spot. She pressed herself against the damp ground, her mind racing. What would Jordan do if she found her? The thought was too terrifying to entertain. A stroke of fortune. The rain intensified, drumming against the truck's roof and obscuring Jordan's vision. The tires skidded on the slick terrain as the vehicle came to a halt. Jordan cursed under her breath, stepping out into the downpour. She clutched a flashlight in one hand and a gun in the other. Her boots squelched in the mud as she began combing the area on foot, her flashlight cutting through the darkness like a blade. Sharon watched from her hiding spot, her body frozen in fear. Jordan's flashlight passed within inches of her face, the beam so close that she could feel its faint warmth against her skin. But the storm was on Sharon's side. The pounding rain and the dense foliage made it nearly impossible for Jordan to spot her. Frustrated, Jordan let out a scream, her voice echoing through the forest. "This is my game, Sharon. You can't win." But even as she raged, it became clear that the situation was slipping out of her control. The storm was relentless, the night impenetrable, and Sharon had vanished like a ghost into the chaos. Sharon's last stand. Sharon waited until Jordan was a safe distance away before emerging from her hiding spot. Her body ached, and her lungs burned from the cold air. She knew she couldn't keep running forever, but she also knew that stopping wasn't an option. If Jordan caught her, there would be no second chance. She stumbled forward, her hands clutching at tree trunks for support. Her legs felt like lead, each step an act of sheer willpower. Her mind screamed at her to rest, to collapse and let the forest swallow her whole. But another part of her, a deeper, stronger part, refused to give up. She had come too far. She couldn't let herself be dragged back to that nightmare. As the minutes stretched into hours, Sharon's pace slowed. The rain showed no signs of letting up, and the cold was beginning to sap what little strength she had left. Her vision blurred, and she fought to stay upright. Every noise, every rustle of leaves, sent a jolt of panic through her. Was Jordan still out there? Was she watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? The breaking point back at the truck, Jordan was livid. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She slammed her fist against the dashboard, her frustration boiling over. This wasn't supposed to happen, she screamed. She was supposed to be mine. But the forest wasn't playing by Jordan's rules. The storm had turned the once familiar terrain into an unrecognizable maze, and the relentless rain had washed away any trace of Sharon's tracks. For the first time, Jordan felt the creeping tendrils of doubt. Maybe Sharon had outsmarted her. Maybe she had underestimated her prey. Sharon, meanwhile, was reaching the limits of her endurance. She collapsed against a large oak tree, her body trembling with exhaustion. The storm raged on around her, but she no longer felt the cold or the wet. All she felt was the fire inside her, the unyielding will to survive. The final triumph. As dawn began to break, Sharon stumbled upon a narrow dirt road cutting through the forest. She followed it, her feet dragging, her body on the verge of collapse. In the distance, she saw a flicker of movement, a car approaching. Summoning the last reserves of her strength, she stepped into the road, waving her arms frantically. The vehicle came to a screeching halt, and a kind-faced driver stepped out, rushing to her side. "Are you okay?" they asked, their voice filled with concern. Sharon could only nod, tears streaming down her face. She had done it. She had escaped. Jordan's reign of terror was over. Jordan's downfall far behind, Jordan sat slumped in her truck, the storm finally breaking her resolve. Her carefully laid plans had unraveled, and her prey had slipped through her fingers. For the first time, she felt powerless, a sensation she had inflicted on others but had never experienced herself. Sharon's escape was more than just a physical victory. It was a testament to her strength, her resilience, and her refusal to let anyone control her fate. She had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, proving that even in the face of overwhelming odds, freedom was worth fighting for.